Mr. Speaker,
I call the Honourable Member Young Jin. Ni hao ma.
很好，谢谢。
Bukachi.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the Crown Minerals Bill. The bill will encourage the development of Crown-owned minerals, which is crucial to New Zealand's economic growth and standard of living. Mr. Speaker, I believe that New Zealand is rich in mineral resources. However, we have not done what we should have done many years ago, that is to have a good understanding of our mineral resource or mineral wells. This bill is a move to the right direction. Mr. Speaker, as we can see in Taranaki, mineral exploration boosts the economy and creates jobs. Mineral exploration contributes $2 billion to the economy in Taranaki, second only to agriculture at $4.6 billion. Exploration sustains 5,090 jobs in Taranaki compared with 3,720 jobs in agriculture. So, Mr. Speaker, I commend the bill to the House. Thanks.
I call the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
G'day, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, that's what the Aussies say. G'day, mate.
Oh, they say that at Wainui too, Mr. Speaker, on occasion. Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised at the lack of enthusiasm shown in the government benches for this bill. I would have thought that they would want to debate it seriously. I thought my colleagues in New Zealand First would want to debate it seriously too. And just a bit of naughty advice for them, it never pays to use the first reading speech notes for the second reading, because that sometimes tends to indicate things are going to happen which are not. This bill has been to a select committee. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party supported it going to the select committee so people could have their say on it at the select committee, and we've listened to what the people have said and we're voting against it now. Because, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of questions that were open and they were not properly answered by the government or by amendments. And there are a series of bottom lines around mining. Some of the bottom lines are the capacity to respond to accidents. Now, that has not been addressed in this legislation. There's got to be clear liability so that the taxpayers don't keep on fronting up for mistakes, either directly or indirectly, as we saw Solid Energy has as far as Pike River is concerned. They should never have bought that. They shouldn't have taken off the private sector the obligations around Pike River. And, Mr. Speaker, we know they did it in an attempt to grease up to the government that we now know they're in so much trouble with. There's got to be robust protections for the natural environment, and that's clear that that is not in this legislation. And there's got to be benefit to the local economy. And with all due respect to the previous speaker, saying that in our most mineral-intensive province, Taranaki, that mining is half the value of agriculture, just has to emphasise the risk and the relative rewards. And we have got to make sure then when mining does proceed, then there's not risk. The rest of the economy is not being placed at risk. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, and I see my old friend Catherine Delahunty, not Eugene Sage, is interjecting. I've been a person who's been quite supportive of the mining industry. I mean, and very unsupportive of the mining industry on the Coromandel. I've got a history of doing case by case and looking at the value of different propositions, Mr. Speaker. And what I have found is that there are some things which are just absolutely pointless. Trying to get gold out of the Coromandel has caused, over the years, enormous environmental damage, and people who want to do it more are, I think, nuts. As though, I think, are people who say there will never be a use for lignite that is in the South Island at the moment. And, Mr. Speaker, I know it's somewhat controversial, but I certainly did not, as Minister of SOEs, object to Solid Energy buying farms and effectively mineral rights to lignite in Southland, because what is sitting under there is 400 years worth of transport energy for New Zealand. I'm just going to say that again slowly. 400 years worth of transport energy for New Zealand. But, you know, I'm the first to accept that we're a long way away from the science that is necessary to get that released. I mean, the sequestration, I witnessed a number of interesting arguments between Don Elder and David Parker, some public and some not, on sequestration. There's no doubt that will happen one day, but whether it's 10 years away, 15 years away or 30 years away, the technology, it's got to be done before we can use that lignite. Unless we're going to do the silly approach that Bill English wanted, and to burn lignite. I mean, burning lignite in pellets is just nuts. It's a total waste of energy, and it's polluting, and it causes all sorts of gas problems. But Mr. Speaker, the other thing that has to happen before the lignite is to be used properly is that we've got to get the hydrogen fuel cell batteries, which are powered off the lignite. We've got to get that technology moved along as well in order to use the energy which is sitting underneath the ground. So what you're hearing from me, Mr. Speaker, is that I think that there are occasions, and a lot of occasions, when the energy that we have in New Zealand can be used, and used carefully, and used properly, and used responsibly. And what we were hoping for, and the reason that we supported this bill off to the Select Committee, we were hoping that the government had its head around this legislation. And I might say that, although I disagreed with him, I thought that Phil Heatley actually had quite a good understanding of it. I mean, he was wrong in a number of areas, but he worked hard, he cared about it, he was a responsible minister, he was on Stephen Joyce's rah, 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 let's dig it up team. But, Mr. Speaker, in the end, we've had him replaced by someone who appears to have had no interest in the area at all, and to date has shown no real understanding. But, Mr. Speaker, the point that I'm making is that we gave the government the opportunity and the encouragement to try and build. I think it's fair to say we will never get a consensus in this Parliament on this issue. While you have in this Parliament John Banks and Catherine Delahunty, we will never get a consensus on mining in New Zealand, and you throw in Damien O'Connor and it gets more complicated still, Mr. Speaker. But what I was hoping for would be that at least across the major parties in New Zealand, we could get a level of consensus that would bring us to some legislation that could be enduring, that people could have some certainty about. And that certainty would mean that where it was appropriate and where proper care had been taken, then investment would be made, and it would be made in the sense that it could be ongoing and enduring. But, Mr. Speaker, what we've had from the National Party is that they're not interested in that sort of approach. What they are doing is despite blowing the trumpet of being pro-mining, they are taking decisions in their legislation because they know that the Labor Party will signal changes to it, policy differences, and the fact that the legislation will not be enduring. What that means is that the very investment that they want is actually less likely to happen, because people who are making investments, especially in the current economic climate, are going to say, hang about, we're going to wait and see whether our investments would be worthwhile or not. And in a funny way, we're getting the policy objective of the Greens through the legislation of the National Party. Because instead of building a No, instead of building a consensus across the building a major party approach to it, what they're doing is going off with a radical mining agenda, which has no certainty and in fact everyone knows will not continue. And the result of that actually will be that mining will not occur because the businesses will not be prepared to put the hundreds of millions of dollars that is necessary into starting the mines. And I think that, you know, as a policy outcome, the Greens could well be happy with that. But what I'm concerned is that proper planning, the proper safety measures, and a proper approach to the environment won't happen in the longer term because of the radical approach by the government, especially by Stephen Joyce, who we all know just does not care either about real jobs that pay well for New Zealand workers or the environment.
I call Mark Mitchell.
Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to take a second call on